Well, call the meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Carrillo,
Present.
Councilmember Peñalosa, Councilmember Stowe,
Present.
Vice Mayor Flores,
Present.
Mayor Reyes.
Present. Thank you. Okay, now is the time for oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the city council on any matter scheduled for closed session. Unless additional time is authorized by the council, all commentary shall be limited to 3 minutes. There's no one in the gallery. Do we have anybody virtually who wishes to comment?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And we can move on to the closed session items.
Just confirming there's no written communications?
None for closed session.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you, Your Honor. There are 6 items before council in closed session this evening. First, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, comes to real property negotiators property 256 East Orange Avenue, Porterville, California, and APN 261-150-057. Agency negotiator John Lawless, negotiating party City of Porterville and Porterville Unified School District under negotiation terms and price. Item 2, Government Code Section 54956.8, comes to real property negotiators property 645 North Prospect Street, Porterville, California. Agency negotiator John Lawless, negotiating party City of Porterville and Porterville Unified School District under negotiation terms and price. Item 3, Government Code Section 54956.8, comes to real property negotiators property, various rights of way throughout the City of Porterville to be determined. Agency negotiator John Lawless, negotiating party City of Porterville and AT&T under negotiation terms and price. Item 4, Government Code Section 54957.6, Conference of Labor Negotiator, Agency Negotiator John Lawless and Patrice Hildreth, Employee Organizations, Porterville Peace Officers Association, Porterville City Firefighters Association, Fire Officer Series, and all unrepresented management employees. Item 5, Government Code Section 54956.9, subsection D, subsection 3, Council Legal Counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation for cases in which facts are not yet known to potential plaintiff. And item 6, Government Code Section 54956.9, subsection D, subsection 4, Council Legal Counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation, 2 cases. Staff's report.
Okay, thank you. We will move into closed session and reconvene at 6:30 p.m. Okay, we'll reconvene from closed session. Anything to report?
Nothing to report, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Flores, and remain standing for an invocation.
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anyone that would like to lead us in an invocation? If not, we'll have a moment of silence. Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, first up, we have a presentation this evening from the Tulare County Stonewall Democrats.
I couldn't see it through the mask. I'm used to looking under my glasses. I'm the secretary. My name is Edith Levon, and this is Marina. She is a member of our club. Our club, it represents all of Tulare County. It's not just a Porterville thing. And every year we do scholarships. But with COVID interfering, we decided we would do something different. And with the library burning, we went ahead and ordered a bunch of books last year, and before they all got here, we had enough. So I've held on to them, but we want to give them to you now. They're children's books. There's 16 of them. This is called The Sassy Duckling. That's one of them. Anybody here know who Big Bird is? He wrote this. So, you know, we think the kids need things, and this is our scholarship monies. And the scholarship has been renamed the Wesley Decox Scholarship. And Wesley has been active in many, many things in Porterville and was a charter member. And we lost him in March, which I feel is a great loss to this community. But we want to present these to the library in Wesley and the club's name.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you for that, and that's an appropriate way to utilize the scholarship money, especially under circumstances that were different last year. So I appreciate the presentation and the donation.
This year's scholarship is providing the same books to the Tulare City Library.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you. All right, thank you for that presentation. And that brings us to oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the City Council on any matter of interest, whether on the agenda or not. Please address all items not scheduled for public hearing at this time. Unless additional time is authorized by the council, all commentary shall be limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to come forward for public comment? And please come forward and state your name for the record.
Edith Levon, address on record. I apologize. If I'd have known about the new speed limits, I'd have been to see you sooner and would have taken time to write. But I figure they're a fait accompli. I live on Morton. And besides the road races, everybody's usually traveling 40, 45 on that road right now. And Chief Crowdle, I hate to say it, but your police officers have been doing it for years too. I have them pass me all the time. There's 3 schools close together on Morton: St. Anne's, Bellevue, and Bartlett. So I decided to take a bumpy drive because Morton is less than satisfactory. And I noticed that a lot of the crossing lines by the schools are really faded. Now, anytime you're crossing where I live, you pray, you get in the lines, and you learn to run like hell if you want to cross the street. It's Dodge car. And I worry about the schools because not all of those spots where the kids cross have volunteers with their stop signs. And I see kids doing the same thing the adults do. And people do not slow down in front of those schools. So what I'm asking is, please, before this goes into effect, by the schools, have those lines dark enough so that I can see them before I get on top of them. And I think it's a reasonable request.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Okay, seeing none in the gallery, is there anybody virtually who would like to comment?
Your Honor, we have nobody virtually via Zoom that wishes to comment. However, we did receive an email communication to our council meeting comments email. If you'd like, I can go ahead and read that.
Yes, please.
This is from Summer Davis. Council members, the homeless transient issue in this city had been getting worse and worse over the past years, and this last year has pushed it even further. It is to a point that it is actually harming individuals and businesses in a real way. I have experienced many incidents in the past year that has brought this to my attention, and specifically in the past few months. For the past few months, many businesses on Main Street have had to replace windows and glass doors due to homeless/transients throwing debris through them. I just experienced my apartment building catching on fire due to homeless or transient people sparking a fire in 90-degree weather. Does the city not care what our streets look like? Every day I come home, there are homeless transients roaming Main Street and Olive. Main Street had becoming a dumping ground for these people, and it's really sad to see my city turn into a place I am not proud of. I have called the police multiple times for transients on roofs or just screaming profanities as we walk our dogs. I am actually scared to walk my dogs past dark because of this issue at hand. Does the city want its residents to be scared to walk in their own neighborhood? This event today has put me past my threshold of holding my tongue about how this city is run. There are many towns and cities in California that have no issue with homelessness because they actually put a program in place, Exeter and Santa Clarita being two that I can name. Maybe the local government should ask for some pointers. At some point, this is going to get so bad that it ruins people's lives and businesses if it hasn't already. Thankfully, to our firefighters, we didn't have to see that happen today. But if there's no solution soon, I can't say the same for the future. A concerned citizen, Summer Davis, and that was sent Monday, May 31st. And that would be the only email communication we had.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for reading that. That brings us to the AB 1234 reports. At this time, this is the time for all AB 1234 reports required pursuant to Government Code 53232.3. First report is the Tulare County Task Force on Homelessness.
Thank you, Mayor. We met on May the 19th. In attendance, it was virtual from the city. We're Claudia Calderon, our city manager, Mr. Lawless, Mr. Ridenauer, and myself. There were no public comments. The minutes of April 21, 2021 were approved. That was the one action item. The rest of the meeting was informational. Mr. Whitaker from the County Health and Human Services provided updates to Project Room Key and the housing of the unsheltered of Tulare County residents, including the efforts of moving to Project Home Key. He spoke briefly on the state funding that would be released, and he said that they were going to participate in a meeting to that regard, that it would be too soon to discuss the funding appropriations and its use. They will need to look at the criteria and the guidance that go along with the funds as they're being released. With regard to the vaccination efforts within the homeless community, he provided and shared that they had been working with the vaccination work group. He reported that 2 weeks ago they were at the Navigation Center in Porterville and 9 were vaccinated. There is still work to be done. The planning efforts on vaccinations for the next go-around with the homeless endeavor would be in Visalia and Tulare. What he stated were that there were a lot of partners, and I reported all of this out at the last meeting, but I will proudly repeat them again because he did share them. He said the partners were Sierra View Medical Center, Cahuilla Delta Street Medicine, Turning Point. He stated that the officials from the city that supported the Navigation Center, Family Health Care Network, and quite a few of additional partners. He said it was a great effort. A lot of people were at the site. He said the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was the primary, but that they did have the availability of the Moderna at the Porterville site as an option. There was a question that was asked during the meeting, and the question that was asked by one of the members that did attend was that, do people under the age of 18 need parental permission if they are experiencing homelessness? For example, students that are homeless and they come in and they want the vaccine. And the question again was, do they require parental permission? The response from Health and Human Services to that regard was, if the youth is emancipated, they would require to provide the documentation, and they would be working with that. If not, that they would ask a parent for that first shot, to be present for that first shot. If you have a homeless student, they would work on the alternative options, but that was the response to that question. I stated that I had participated and attended the vaccination event at the Navigation Center to support the collaborations and the partnerships. I had reported out that as part of the outreach and people that did attend the event, that they went out as volunteers to the homeless camps to share and provide them with the information of the vaccination event. And at that time, when they went out to speak to the homeless at the camp, they indicated that 40 were interested, and if only 9 got vaccinated, that was the efforts of continuing to move forward. They know that they have to continue to work hard. There was a presentation with regard to a neighborhood village. That is a project that involves self-help enterprises and the Salt and Light Works, which is a new partnership that started in Tulare County. It is in the community of Goshen, and it was a pilot that will be using manufactured housing, that they will be manufactured in Lindsay, and that the manufactured housing project will have approximately 6 acres, and they will have state authority to that regard. They looked at the people that looked at the project, the Salt and Light, it was community first. They saw the project back in Austin, Texas, and more information as that develops will be brought back because they spoke of grant, the timeline, and the funding. With regard to what's going on in other cities, Tulare only reported that they needed to touch base within their council to find a location, to resolve and have a strategic plan to facilitate the homeless needs in the community. They spoke of budget. They have to dedicate a breakout and team building session to address the homeless issues. They do have a project, but it has to come back with communications. Visalia did report that they sent out RFPs for a low barrier navigation center. They received 2 proposals, and they did select TC Hope for the proposal. It would be a 100-bed navigation center. However, this project did receive a land donation. And Self-Help is the nonprofit. Their council have set a goal to open in 2 years and work on the logistics of that. It always pleases me that when Porterville reports, and Claudia Calderon does a very good job of sharing the information. The Porterville Welcome Center, to date of the meeting, they have served 1,326 unduplicated clients since opening. That's 50 more since my last report from last month. The daily average continues to be steady since they opened. It's 70 to 75 that do come in for services for meals. The total number that have been sheltered is 52. 16 have exited, and 3 have been housed in permanent housing. 78 have received case management. This is good news, and the council will be excited to hear, because you always say persistence and perseverance with regard to the efforts and working toward it. As of May 18th, they have partnered with Health and Human Services. They now have the eligibility worker, the social worker, the drug and alcohol counselor that will be on site on a rotating basis. So with all of that being said, and Claudia did share that the volunteer outreach that I have stated earlier, I didn't have the name, but the agency is the Central California Family Crisis Center. They developed a new outreach team, so they were the ones that went out to the homeless camps to share and provide the information with regard to the vaccination center. That concludes my report. The next meeting is on June 16th.
Great, thank you for that update. Yeah, very good. The next report is for the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District meeting of May 20th. I was in attendance for that meeting, and this meeting was a special public hearing, a special meeting for a public hearing to get public comment on the budget for the 21-22 recommended budget. Prior to this meeting, the ad hoc committee had gone over the budget presentation to make sure that it was in line with the governing board's wishes. One of the points that I wanted to make about the budget at the Air District is that they do zero-based budgeting for their budgets, so they don't just take last year's and slap on a percentage more because of they look and see what they think the demand's going to be. Every dollar's justified, so they do a good job of putting that together. But that being said, this upcoming budget, should it be approved, which part of this meeting was to set a date for June 17th, public hearing and approval of this budget. But it did include more money for the, what I like to call the greatest hits. So the tune-in, tune-up program for cars. So those that have cars that won't pass smog, there's ways to exchange those and get money to get a new car. The tractor trade-in, as well as heavy-duty vehicles, vehicle replacement, commercial lawn care, equipment replacement to make it electric. So all of, as well as more money for the AB 617, which is community level air monitoring. They'll be looking to add some more communities to that. That's something that we can expect. That's primarily in some of the larger metropolitan areas where they have high concentrations of residency and traffic. So, but it does move into some small areas that are underserved. So look for those to move into different communities. The budget is on their website. It was a 4-hour meeting to go over the budget. So it's quite lengthy, but I will say that there's, as I mentioned, the greatest hits are all included and nothing's cut out. There is an addition that was made previously, I would say on the fly this past year with COVID, which was money set aside or leniency for the incentives or the penalties and fees that go with development, understanding that some of these fees can be a make or break prospect for businesses that are looking to either develop, expand, or stay in operation. So there was consideration to be able to look at each case and make sure that it was a fair assessment of fees based on the business's needs. So as I mentioned, the next meeting will be June 17th, where we will have another public hearing and some more comment, as well as potentially approve that budget. And that was the only item on that meeting. So unless there's any questions, I'll move on to the next report, which is the Porterville Area Airport Development Corporation, or PADA, meeting for May 20th. And I was in attendance, as well as the Vice Mayor and staff. This meeting was primarily to discuss the now moving forward as they've broken ground and developing the area which will be the relocated Eagle Mountain Casino. A lot of the discussion revolved around coordination of projects, specifically looking at road projects and predetermined projects and the timeline of those projects and coordination of future projects that are required because of the relocation, as well as those that were established that outside of the redevelopment or the relocation of the casino. Vice Mayor, did you want to add any?
No, you
Okay.
covered it because I was looking at my notes, and it was an emphasis. It was a good informational meeting, but there was a good exchange and dialogue, and as to where we move forward with some of the projects, and still a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely, and good to see some more as they move forward, identifying the folks who they want in the room who are, and understandably so with the timeline now in effect as the ground's been broken, to see who they can have in the room to be able to streamline the process. So it was a relatively good meeting. And unless there's any questions for that, the next
Just one small question. I wondered if the old casino area will be repurposed in some way, or do you know anything about that?
that's,
Such a huge area, that's all.
thank you. And that's outside of our area, so unless there's any other questions from council, we can move on to the City Council COVID Ad Hoc Committee meeting of May 24th. Councilmember Carrillo, did you want to give the report?
Sure.
Okay.
Good evening. I will give the update on the last COVID ad hoc meeting. So I attended with the mayor and city staff. The first item we had was a temporary use permit for a Makers Market series on Friday evenings. The first one was going to be held on June 11th. This was going to be held in the Galaxy Theater's parking lot, and they were awaiting on approval from the owner for that. Next item was a community civic event application for La Casa de Jovita grand opening, scheduled for June 12th on Putnam and 2nd, the parking lot. And one of the items, they were requesting barricades for safety out there. The next item was a community civic event application for Porterville Fair from July 8th through 11th. There was a public safety review with some indoor regulations that we looked at. We recommended that those be forwarded to the city council meeting this evening on June 1st. Next item was temporary use permit applications for a craft fair to be held on July 3rd. Vendor spacing, we recommended that vendor spacing be consistent with fire code, which is 700 square feet on each side without sides, and have a separation from fireworks booth in the C train. Let's see, and then another item was just that the staff had mentioned that Landing 13 had requested removal of the city barricades that we put out there, so that would void the outdoor dining permit use there. And then we just had a brief discussion about outdoor dining after COVID, and thought that after the June 15th regulations changed, staff will be seeking some direction from council, probably at the upcoming June 15th meeting. And those are all the items. I don't know, Mayor, if you wanted to fill in anything I left out there.
No, but as the council hears, people are looking to have some events, which I think fortunately for us, we've been very clear on recommendations for what's happened during COVID, and I think that potentially people will voluntarily hold some of those beyond, if not, at least consider them. So, and as mentioned, 2 of the items will be brought before you tonight to approve potentially, so.
I do have a question.
Yes.
The parking lot event that was submitted by Makers Market, is that a nonprofit, or is that the whiskey label that wants to do that? I'm serious. I didn't know if they come in and, I thought maybe they want to have an event, but,
I wish it was that's my favorite whiskey, but it's not them. It's actually it's a type of craft fair is what I would call it. They're
Oh.
called makers.
Makers,
And they're
okay.
hot.
all right.
I mean, the mayor is better versed than this than I am, but it was
Okay.
Maker's Mark. But it's-
Yeah.
Okay, people that make their product.
Yes, all right.
And, okay, they make their product.
But I know that the one, I've seen it at the store with the red wax on the top of the maker's mark.
I don't drink, but I've heard of it, nothing.
I've heard it's good.
And I believe that one's still pending some information, so. And I believe that concludes the reports. So unless there's any other questions, we can move on to the consent calendar. All consent calendar items are considered routine and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these matters unless a request is made, in which event the item will be removed from the consent calendar. All items removed from the consent calendar for further discussion will be heard at the end of scheduled matters.
Mayor,
Yes.
if there are no items to be pulled, no conflicts to any of the items, I make a motion that we accept items 1 through 11 of the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion.
I would like to pull number 7, if that's okay.
Okay.
I just have a question. so.
Sure. Did you want to change your
I'll
motion?
amend it,
Okay.
items 1 through 6, 8 through 11, with item number 7 to be pulled.
I'll second.
Or maybe John can ask my question now and just get it over with.
Well, no, I was just going to state that for the record, that I have a conflict on number 8. So I'm not voting in this regard, but I do have a conflict on number 8.
Did you want to, we can address the question on number 7 if you just want to take it with the consent calendar.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I can just, because it's just a quick question.
Sure.
Is that the well that was promised to us 4 or 5 years ago?
Yes.
That's the one.
Oh,
Which
okay.
is part of the East Porterville, it's
Part
one
of
of the
this.
3, so this, you're correct. This is the well that the state withdrew its agreement, which then got folded into the East Porterville Water Supply Project as the 3rd well of the 3-well agreement, which we are finally now seeing the financial agreement for its construction,
Okay,
which also includes the consolidation of the Central Mutual? Central Mutual, so it's Aiken and Central Mutual.
all right. So I can quit talking bad about the state now, Mike?
Well, no, instead of 4 wells, you got 3.
No. Okay,
That's up to you.
yeah. Okay.
I do have some good news perhaps in the budget discussion, so
Okay.
maybe save your comments.
I only talk bad about them.
Save your comments for about an hour from now.
All right.
Would
Does-
you like to amend
I like-
the
yes,
motion
I
to
would.
include 7?
I will do that. I'll amend it to
Okay.
include 7.
I'll second it.
You can
Okay,
Vote on the amended motion.
so we have a motion and a second. Okay, we'll call for the vote. Okay, passes 4-0. Thank you. That brings us to the public hearings portion of our agenda.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have one public hearing this evening, which is to consider a conditional use permit to allow for the development of a residential tentative parcel map with lots without street frontage, and Mr. Reitner is going to provide that staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Lawless. Honorable Mayor and City Council, on January 29th, 2020, the Project Review Committee originally reviewed PRC 2020-001 for proposed 10-unit multifamily development on a single .86-acre parcel located at 2296 West Henderson Avenue in the RM2 Medium Density Residential Zone District, which is permitted within that zone district. The local development community requested a mechanism to subdivide residential properties by way of parcel map with lots not having street frontage to facilitate infill development in early 2021. At its meeting on April 6, 2021, the City Council directed staff to review and process proposed residential tentative parcel maps that contain lots without street frontage under Conditional Use Permit CUP which is we refer to as a CUP, as outlined in section 400.05 of the Porterville Development Ordinance. Section 400.05 of the Porterville Development Ordinance states that any modification of a tentative parcel map for any of the requirements and regulations set forth in the Development Ordinance as it pertains to lot design are subject to the approval of a CUP. The proposed project divides an existing 0.86 acre parcel into 4 parcels and a remainder, parcel 1 being 6,938 square feet and parcel 2 7,788 square feet, parcel 3, 8,197 square feet, parcel 4, 4,170 square feet, with a remainder of 16,108 square feet. Access will be provided through a cross-access and parking agreement, allowing the parcels access to Henderson Avenue through parcel 1 and parcel 2, as you can see on the screen. The subject site is consistent with the general plan land use designation, RM2, and zoning standards for RM2 as well. And the use of multifamily residential is allowed in that zoning. The RM2 zone district designated is intended to accommodate a variety of housing types such as small single-family homes, detached zero-lot developments, duplexes, townhouses, and garden apartments with a maximum residential density of 15 units per net acre. The proposed tentative parcel map with a future multifamily development would suit the purpose of this zone designation. The project meets requirements outlined in section 400.05 of the Porterville Development Ordinance. On April 6th, the City Council provided direction that finding 1 of the 5 required findings for a CUP to vary regulations of a parcel map that states there are special circumstances or conditions affecting the property that make it impractical to conform to all the provisions prescribed by the series provided, however, that no exceptions may be granted to any requirements imposed by the Subdivision Map Act or any other applicable state law is met in regard to the proposed parcel maps without street frontage. The proposed CUP complies with the following required findings, which include that the modification is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the substantial property right of the petitioner, that the granting of the modification will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the territory in which such property is situated, that the exception is appropriate for the proper design and/or function of the subdivision, and that the granting of the exception is consistent with the general plan. Development of the site as proposed to provide needed housing in conformance with the city's general plan use and housing elements, as well as the requirements of the California Subdivision Map Act and local ordinance. The multifamily development supports the general plan land use guiding policies to allow and encourage efficient infill development in existing neighborhoods. The draft resolution outlines the future development of the property with a proposed multifamily development shall meet all requirements that pertains to the development ordinance. The development will require recordation of a cross-access and parking agreement between divided parcels. The proposed CUP grants approval of the subdivision of the existing property as it relates to lot design. On May 19th of 2021, the environmental coordinator made a preliminary determination the project is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to section 15061B2 of the California Code of Regulations, CEQA guidelines, under the general rule that project is exempt pursuant to a categorical exemption 15332 infill development projects. Staff's recommendation that the City Council adopt the draft resolution approving the conditional use permit of PRC 2020-001-C, subject to the conditions of approval. Staff is available for questions.
Does council have any questions for staff?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'll let you.
And we're opening this public, this isn't continued public hearing from previously? Or, no, okay. Okay, so we'll open the public hearing at 7:16 PM. Is there anybody who would like to speak on this item? And seeing none in the gallery, is there anybody virtually who wanted to speak on this item?
Your Honor, we have no one in the Zoom gallery that wishes to speak, and we did not receive any written or email communications for that item.
Okay, thank you. And we will close the public hearing at 7:17 PM. and bring it back to council.
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, this is the property that has the 4 partials and want to hold off on one? Is this? Okay. Now, that one, is there a limited time when they come back and build? Do they have to wait a certain amount of time, or can they come back 2 weeks later and build it?
Javier, do you want to address the question in regard to subdivision map act and timing of the remainder?
Did he hear me? Did he hear me okay?
Right, so the question was how long they have to develop that remainder?
Yes, how long do they have to wait, or can they just develop it right away, or do they have to wait a year, or is there any time?
No, they can develop it whenever they choose to, as long as it's by separate process from the rest of the development. So I guess and in and of itself, it kind of is already a separate process because all of our building permits are separate. It'll be a building permit by parcel.
Okay. So
But by
they're
default,
actually,
they're all separate processes.
so they're actually just doing this so it won't be a subdivision, correct?
Correct, and it's and the subdivision map act allows this. They just got to follow a certain process, like which requires certificate of compliance to make sure that that's legally created, which it is based on this. So I wouldn't say it's a workaround. It just has to follow certain steps to legally build on that remainder.
And you're okay with this?
Yes, yes, definitely.
All right.
Okay. Councilmember Carrillo, did you have any questions?
Just one, I think, right now. The conditional use permit, that process is a part of the ordinance, correct?
Correct. That is in Series 400.05 to be able to vary. So our code states, our development ordinance states that all lots shall have frontage. To be able to vary from that, it requires a conditional use permit currently. So I know there's been some discussion about that in April. But yes, that's the process currently.
Okay. That's all I have right now.
Okay. Vice Mayor, did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions right now, Mayor. Thank you. Mine was in alignment to what Councilmember Stowe asked. I don't have any questions.
Okay, so how would we like to proceed?
I guess I'll make a motion that we adopt the draft resolution approving the conditional use permit.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? And seeing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Okay, passes 4-0. Thank you. That concludes the public hearings, and that brings us to the second readings.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 2 second readings before you this evening. The first is to give second reading to ordinance number 1884, which is repealing and replacing Chapter 2, Article 9, Internal City Audits of the Porterville Municipal Code. This was, ordinance was modified at your last meeting and given first reading, which allowed for the appointment of 2 members of council to serve on that, plus made a title change from Chief Financial Officer to Finance Director. And so recommendation would be to provide second reading of that ordinance this evening. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff from council?
I don't have any questions, but I'd like to go ahead with the staff recommendation that the second reading be given to the ordinance number 1884 and to waive the further reading and adopt said ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by the Vice Mayor and second by Councilmember Stowe. If there's no more discussion, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Passes 4-0. Thank you.
Read by title only, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Ordinance number 1884, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Porterville repealing and replacing Chapter 2, Article 9, Internal City Audits of the Porterville Municipal Code. Our next second reading this evening is to give reading to ordinance number 1885, amending Chapter 17, Article 15, Section 17-15, prima facie speed limits determined on certain streets. As was reported at your past meeting, every 5 to 7 years, you have to do a speed survey of streets across the community based upon the 85th percentile of the traffic flows, which corresponded with the changes to the posted speed limits that were contained in that ordinance. So recommendation would be to provide second reading of that ordinance this evening.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council to staff regarding this item? No questions? Okay.
I don't know. But, you know,
Questions?
not a question.
Thank you.
Ms. LeBon got up and mentioned about Morton and, you know, and the speed limit on Morton now and about the school. But there's a 25-mile-an-hour, you know, for the school district. So just to let everybody know that, you know, they're not doing 40 all the way down. At least they're not supposed to be. We do have a school speed limit when school's in session.
Correct, and I know that Mr. Knight would love to tell you about how the specs of street,
Yeah.
the street paint that we know is not what you have today
Right.
because of environmental. Would you like to elaborate on that, Mr. Knight? This is a sore subject in streets, given environmental considerations in street paint.
Just to add additional comment to that, the life expectancy, we're seeing the expectancy last not even a full year on the water-soluble paints that we're using. It's not the traditional oil-based paints that people had remember in the past that are there for years on end. The duration and life expectancy is much less. But the city has been working on doing some improvements with striping and evaluating the time and life expectancy of those efforts and continuing to improve on this.
And I do know when school starts, they start spraying those for visibility. So, yeah, that's one of the other things. And just before school starts, they will, you know, brighten up those lines.
Yeah, and a lot of this is specific to California, even with paint used in commercial and residential, there are paints that are not allowed into the state of California, given the properties of certain paints that California doesn't allow them to be used for application.
And not everywhere in California has the same exposure to the sun and some of the weather that we have too. So not just the paint, but a lot of things don't last quite as long as they should in our area because of the extreme heat and exposure to the sun. So, but also.
Yeah, but that being said, I know that that conversation that was raised is an active one in the streets, is that you're just going to have to do more work than you usually are a bit accustomed to.
I know that Bartlett just put up a sign, a lighted sign on their school. I know St. Anne's has one as well. So if we can communicate to them, if they see a concern, then they have the ability to have some sort of visibility there if it's their concern. But I hope that as you say, I hope that everybody is observing the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit when the children are present. as well as with Bellevue. I know that's kind of the backside of the school, but, you know, I, for one, when I'm driving there, I'm very cautious because I expect there to be children at any time during the day there, so I hope that other people are expressing that same concern for safety.
Similar to the subjects that were brought up when Henderson at J Street, the J Street crossing with, I think there's a care home, is my memory. So there's a lighted crosswalk that's being installed as part of the Henderson Avenue reconstruction project. Similarly, there's been much conversation as Morton Avenue is being redesigned right now, is being designed for reconstruction right now of what those crosswalks will be in reconstruction, whether they'll be LED. Caltrans, as the council is aware, is not favorable to LED crosswalks anymore. In fact, you can't even secure grant funding through state or federal government for them anymore. So they're going to something called HAWK systems, which are basically pedestrian crossing lights, and as they're called. So we are evaluating that. So when we come to council with the authorization to advertise for bid in, you know, a year, or, you know, and that's going to be different segments as well. There will be an active conversation about what the crossing, what those crossing devices are when that happens.
Okay. So with that, thank you for the discussion on that. I think it's important to, as was expressed during oral communications, to exhibit that we are also concerned with that, as the safety in our community is very important to us. But with that, I'll go ahead and move that that the City Council give second reading to ordinance number 1885, waive further reading, and adopt said ordinance and have it be read by title alone.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If not, we'll call for the vote. Okay, passes 4-0. Thank you.
Ordinance number 1885, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Porterville, amending Chapter 17, Article 15, Section 17-15, prima facie speed limits determined on certain streets of the Porterville Municipal Code.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to scheduled matters.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 4 scheduled matters before the council this evening. First, to consider approval for community civic event for Sierra Lakes Christian Ministry and Jovita Castaneda, La Casa de Jovita grand opening, which is proposed for June 12th, 2021. It was brought to my attention, and I don't know if Jovita's here or not.
There's someone in the audience.
Okay. Okay.
That they're.
I think as we take the item, if we have questions, we'll ask you to come forward. Uh-oh. Gosh.
Okay.
Well, if we have questions, we'll ask you to come forward. Okay.
So this event is, the request is to use one of the lanes of public parking lot at Putnam and Second, which you heard in the previous that there'd be some kind of barriers to provide, would not block the alley and would provide safety for those that wish to congregate in that area in support of this grand opening. This was reviewed by the COVID ad hoc committee, Jovita was going to be requesting to change the date from June 12th to June 19th. So as a modification of that, that's what I'd understood was going to be her request. I haven't seen it in writing, but understood that was what, want to convey that that is a modification of the application and the report as it was presented.
So as far as our consideration, we're safe to have the date for our consideration be the 19th?
You might ask her, she might.
Yeah, please come forward if you would. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Sonia Cruz, and I'm here in representation of Jovita Castaneda. Yes, she did request about 3 weeks ago or about a month ago for the 12th of June. But then last week she saw on the news that they were going to have the state was going to lift the distance, to keep the distance, and the use of face masks and all the restrictions. And since she's under a lot of pressure because the time is very close already, and she was gonna request to be moved. Last week, she came to fill out papers to request to be moved to the 19th instead of the 12th. And they told her to come in person because they couldn't do any changes. So she was supposed to come, she was ready, and at 5 she started having pain, and she had to go to emergency, and right now she's over there and we're just messaging each other. But she told me to come in representation of her. But that's the reason why she wanted to change it, so there wouldn't be a lot of restrictions by the 19th, since supposedly there's gonna be changes on the statewide, starting on the 15th. Is that what was gonna happen? Is that gonna take place in Porterville as well, or?
Well, we will have a meeting prior to that on the 15th, and then we'll consider what the state guidelines are, and potentially there'll be changes based on what those state guidelines are. So beyond that, I don't know. But I would say that it's probably fortunate and a good idea to change it to the 19th.
And she's still, like I said, she's having a lot of pressure and health problems, so she was still gonna request, even if there were still restrictions, she was still gonna request for it to be moved to the 19th. So, will she be able to get an answer today, or will she have to wait until?
The items on the agenda tonight, I think that we can accept the date change as part of our consideration for holding the event. As to any specifics on what the restrictions may or may not be at that time, I don't know that we'd be able to answer that tonight.
Okay, but yeah, she'll be fine as long as the date is changed. I'll give her more, she'll be more relief because she's under a lot of pressure. She's been having a lot of health problems.
Okay.
So will I let her know that the change was accepted, the date change was accepted?
When you hear the gavel fall is when you'll know.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for the representative? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So council, how would you like to proceed?
I know, we're all looking at each other.
We're looking at each other.
I know.
Well, I'll make a motion that, we accept the date change and we accept the application for the event.
And the date of June the 19th?
Yes.
Okay, then if you make that motion, I'll go ahead and second it with the revision.
Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second, and I just wanted to again reiterate that the ad hoc committee went through the application as well as the site map and proceeded with this recommendation. So did staff have a comment?
I just wanted, I'm kind of working with the best information, because it's going to come up on the next item as well, is that there's been kind of a draft, so to speak, of what's called beyond the guidelines, which the current restrictions would be, this is an outdoor event, so I think if it is kind of just a gathering, the limit is 50. If it's by invite only, it's up to 100. But on the other side of June 15th, it's outdoors. There really isn't anything less than 10,000 is considered acceptable as an outdoor event, with recommendations for distancing and face coverings, but they're not required. So there's no differentiation between, it's just the rule, when it speaks to that, you're going from either 50 or 100 to 10,000. I was going to get to that in this next item.
Okay.
So it's timely.
No, and thank you for that. It's important for us to have the best guidance going forward to make the decisions. And as I indicated, without so much, because I didn't want to go overboard with my anticipation of what's going to happen after the 15th, but I do have a good feeling that it's wise to schedule things for after that date if people.
Yeah, and those beyond the guidelines is in the staff report for the local emergency COVID-19 items. So it's in the public.
Okay, so that being said, we have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and we'll call for the vote. Okay, passes 4-0. Thank you. Okay, so the date change and the event have been approved. Thank you. And that takes us to the next item.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next item is consider approval of community civic event for the Tulare County Junior Livestock Show and Community Fair Incorporated, which is to have the, fortunately, the community fair as proposed to the council scheduled for July 8th through 11th, 2 months after that has traditionally been the case and certainly disappointingly canceled last year. So been proposed for this to occur July 8th through 11th. As I previously mentioned, under what's called the Beyond the Blueprint, if I called that correctly, there are significant changes coming to the outdoor, I would say outdoor regulations, as there are, as allowing up to 10,000 individuals outdoors with recommended guidelines. There are will still be some restrictions from in terms of indoor activities, which I think the fair is looking to limit those kinds of opportunities in trying to focus on having outdoor events or outdoor activities in general speaking. We have an agreement that speaks to many of the items that is already contained in there in terms of under the license agreement for alcohol and its availability. This was reviewed by the COVID Ad Hoc Committee and recommended for consideration by the council this evening. Happy to answer any questions.
Are they gonna have the animals? No animals, right? Because school's out and they already did the bidding and.
You know, I'm not, that's a good question. I'm not certain.
Did you want to,
I think you have representatives here.
would you like to come forward?
Oh, there's someone here. Okay.
Yeah. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Susie Godfrey, the General Manager at Porterville Fair, and we are done with the animals for this year. They've done their thing. We had them over several weekends with one species at a time in the barn. So no, there will not be animals, so there will not be a big congregation of anything at any given point. Okay?
Great. Are there any other questions for the applicant while they're, no? Okay, thank you. Okay, council, how would you like to proceed?
I'll make a motion that,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. What are you
I'll
gonna-
second it. You go ahead and make the motion.
That we
You start.
approve the Porterville Fair on July 8th through the 11th.
And I second
fair.
that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's call for the vote. Okay, passes 4-0. Thank you. Thank you. And that brings us to item 17.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next item in order is consideration of the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 budget and setting of date for public hearing. As contained in the staff report, consistent with the city charter, city managers required to submit to city council's consideration a proposed budget for the upcoming 21-22 fiscal year, which the city charter provides that not later than 30 days before the end of the year, an estimate of expenditures and revenues of the departments be presented. I have crafted a budget message, which I'll kind of cover, and I'm not going to read eight pages to you, but I will cover it in some overview about major activities. Generally, any overall reduction in fund balances comes as a result of accumulated monies for capital expenditures and completion of projects as defined by the city council. And I would say importantly here, because this has been even just this last year, we had a modified budget appropriation where we did a continuing resolution of the 1920 year to October 1st of 2020, which allowed us additional time to evaluate priority projects as well as what budget expectations would be. And so we had an October 1st budget authorization through June 30th. All expenditure authority would be expired June 30th, so there needs to be some type of action to allow for either by continuing resolution or the adoption of a new budget effective July 1st. And so there's no timeline that's established in the charter, so just as a matter, it's really to whatever is comfortable and appropriate in the council's determination. So with that, just a brief, I say brief, a lot of activity in the budget, a lot of large projects that are beginning processes or in various stages. Certainly, over this last year as we enter into the proposed 21-22 budget, I'd say three major considerations, which has been the recovery from the library fire and the pandemic. And then thirdly, with the Eagle Mountain Casino relocation project. So those three large subject matters driving a lot of different efforts. And I guess beginning with the library, kind of in two sections, one being the temporary interim library development, which is currently being designed for preparation for advertise for bid for tenant improvements, which you'll see contained in the budget, is money set aside approximately, I think 1.3 million in this next year appropriated for the development of the interim library, which is entirely from library proceeds, and that includes the lease payment, which is $120,000 a year, plus tenant improvements, as well as temporary and permanent equipment. And differentiation is that temporary equipment would be only to serve for the no more than 6 years, that, and hopefully less. We've done as the council is aware, there's a 3-year lease agreement with 3 one-year options to that. So the purchase of that equipment or goods would be expected just to be in that life of that short-term, temporary, interim use, with some of it having ongoing usability in the new facility once it's defined, and so those are differentiated, and that gets to the different pools of the insurance that's accessible to the city as part of this. So 1.34 million that is budgeted in that. In addition to that, the mobile library is being prepared for utilization. And then, as the council is aware, there's a library facility planning committee chaired by Councilmember Carrillo, who is working with your selected consultant in the development of a needs assessment for a new facility. Related to the library fire has been the recommendations from the SART, which implementation has begun. At your last meeting, you took action in the appropriation and the formation of a deputy chief position funded out of Measure I, and as well as this evening you took action in the purchase or beginning the purchase of a vehicle to support that position. I'm happy to report to you this evening that former Battalion Chief Cogburn, now Deputy Chief Cogburn, has been appointed to that position. So Chief Lapierre made that announcement, and then I can share it with you. So, and then there's been other promotions within the department as well based on that appointment to Battalion Chief, and I'll speak to that a little bit later this evening. So, and then in addition to that, the city has applied, consistent with the SART, has applied for a federal SAFER grant, which would support 100% the financial support for the hiring of 6 firefighters, 2 on each of the city's 3 shifts. They too would be proposed to be funded out of Measure I. However, if we're able to secure the federal grant, which is, we believe we have a good opportunity to be successful through that process, that would allow continued, I would say, savings in Measure I to continue to build for capital projects, which is namely streets, and I'll speak to that here in just a little bit. Both on the library side and the fire department side, significant budgetary considerations being given there. Currently, in previous acts, consistent with council's direction, there's currently 4.85 million. That is lockbox, is what I would call it, is indicating it was before strictly for library purposes from library insurance proceeds, and so that's currently on account right now. And we continue to work through with our third-party consultant that claim. In addressing the pandemic, as the council is aware, and I'll speak again into this a little bit later this evening, the American Rescue Plan appropriated its federal appropriation of $19.98 million which at your last meeting, the council provided direction in its priorities that for eligible expenses with priorities of water and sewer, broadband and technology infrastructure, homeless services, local business assistance, in particular restaurants, and city recovery with an emphasis on public safety. What is in place right now is what's called an interim final rule, which means that here are just what's been released by Department of Treasury thus far has been general guidelines that are still going through the public comment process, and I believe looking for finalization August 31st. So this is one of those where it's in the budget. Actually, funds, half of the funds are on account now in the name of the city, have been transferred. And so now waiting for kind of what the final rules are. And so this is going to have to be, I would say, kind of an organic discussion about these expenditure of funds. And I would say being flexible and really how are those funds going to be best be used in the future success of the community for all residents. Speaking of Eagle Mountain Casino relocation, have broken ground and beginning construction with planned opening in fall of 2022. As reported previously by members of council, meetings are occurring on a regular basis looking at supporting infrastructure, which includes a partnership between the city and the Tule River Tribe in the development of a tertiary treatment facility, has an estimated cost of $17 million, as well as the development of a new storm drain recharge basin, which is anywhere from $5 to $10 million as well in its development. And those are going to be funded primarily by the city, or the storm drain and recharge basin funded entirely by the city with a proportional share of the tertiary treatment facility at 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 by the city, 1/3 by the Tule River Tribe. And funds from this come from the issuance of water revenue anticipation bonds or certificates of participation that were issued earlier this year at $36 million. The remainder of those funds are being looked at for further tertiary treatment and other water development projects, and I'll speak to that here in a little bit. In the general fund, the 2020-21, as we're looking at the estimates for this current fiscal year, are overstated. As council may be aware, and you'll see in the budget message, we kind of provide a 5-year look back on general fund activity. You'll notice last year finished with a shortfall, which was because of an audit adjustment that happened because the CARES Act, the first allocation of federal CARES Act funding had initially been accounted for in the prior fiscal year, but because it was booked as a receivable, but because it was being payable in the current 2021 fiscal year, it became a payable this year instead of a receivable last year. So it understates the revenue. So it understates revenues for last year, overstates for this year, just because the expenses were in the prior year, which are being offset by revenues in this year. So just as you look at a number that's as a projection showing to be a surplus, which there is a surplus, it is overstated by about $740,000 because of the CARES Act offset of the expenditures in the prior year. So we are looking at, and there is a recommendation that the council consider an appropriation of up to $2 million of its ARP funds in support of public safety, which, based upon estimated expenditures in the general fund, which primarily public safety constitute, with an appropriation of $2 million of ARP would present a $181,000 surplus in the upcoming 21-22 fiscal year. Important to note this, and the council may be aware of this, with the real uncertainty that we had in the current, I have to get the years right, 2021 fiscal year, this current fiscal year, we had appropriated $2 million of Measure I as a potential, if there was any potential shortfalls in this current fiscal year, which we are not anticipating, given good sales tax activity. So the good news of that is that that's $2 million of Measure I that it will continue to build within the Measure I account, which actually was offset by LTF funds that were offset by 2 million of transit grant funds. All of that just to say that presents $2 million of additional road monies, and, you know, and really an LTF or Measure I. So, which kind of gets me into the Measure H and Measure I. So Measure H is in a generally maintenance mode is what I call it. The expenditure plans that were developed as part of Measure H have been fully implemented both for police, fire, and we continue to appropriate up to 15% of Measure H funds towards library and literacy, which is the one area where, given the library fire, there's been reduced expenditures out of Measure H for library and literacy efforts. We are still budgeting towards that number, but the expenditures are expected to be beneath that given the, I would anticipate more activity than last year with the interim facility being open this coming fiscal year. So I don't anticipate the same lack of expenditures, just it's going to be more, it's still probably not going to be at the 50%, but we'll be providing quarterly updates in terms of progress on that. But there is, but because of performance of sales tax and because even though there's an appropriation, doesn't mean 100% expenditure of funds. There is accumulated funds estimated at 1.97 million in Measure H, which is restricted to Measure H. So just as an acknowledgement that there are funds in Measure H for activities or projects consistent with the measure. It is special tax, so restricted in terms of what its uses could be. Which then moves to Measure I, which is recommended in this next year. 10.8 million in appropriations is in this budget, with the largest appropriation being for streets. So you have what is seeing now banking of funds as projects are under design, and then as those projects go to construction, Measure I paying for those projects. So the next big Measure I project you see coming is Villa reconstruction, which I think there's 3 million of that is to account for Villa's reconstruction. We are looking at, and as I shared with you, given that Measure I didn't need to be utilized from a general fund balance, that we're looking at 10.3 million as a reserve. But again, there's a number of projects, and you'll see within the fund summary all of the different projects that are currently under design, which have Measure H attached to them. So even though you may be, as I shared at the very beginning, you save money for the projects so that you ensure that you have the funds available to do the projects when they're ready. So there is going to be an accumulation, then any drawdown will be for the projects as they are completed or executed. We did review these budgets, both Measure H and Measure I, with the two-talk committee last week, and they don't take any action on them because they're not adopted, but we did review that with them, and they didn't have any concerns with them as presented with two-talk. Which typically, under Measure I especially, is the conversation of streets. So for this next fiscal year, there's 21.75 million estimated in street construction activities over this next, I would say, next fiscal year. If they're not going to construction, they'll be very close to going to construction. So again, accumulation of monies drawn down as projects are done. So Villa reconstruction, Newcomb reconstruction, Maine reconstruction, Henderson rehab, and Montgomery reconstruction are all significant street projects as contained, and those were the priorities of the council as defined for that. So beyond that, 21.75 million in estimated projects is another 26.5 million in estimate of projects under design right now. The largest being Morton Avenue reconstruction, which is under design, anticipated to be up to a 2-year design, looking at construction in some phased construction 2 fiscal years from now. So in the 23-24 fiscal year, it would begin reconstruction in phases to be determined. Grand Avenue reconstruction, Westwood reconstruction, Union reconstruction, Plano rehab project to State Route 90. And I got to be candid with you, I just don't see it happening because of a roundabout that's being planned for that intersection. And and unless something differently happens, I just can tell that Caltrans is just kind of waiting for that project that's on the horizon as they're looking to begin design on it. And then date reconstruction, we have a small street segment there we continue to evaluate. So cumulatively, almost $50 million in street projects that are either ready to go to construction or under design with, I equate it to being LAX and watching the planes fly in. You know, you don't know, you know that they're going to land, and so it's a matter of seeing these different projects come in and very large, and a lot of, when I say these amounts, these are just the road segment parts. That's not double this with the utilities that are coming along with it. So we're doing water, both water and purple pipe, recycled water, sewer, and storm drain. For example, Morton is going to be a complete, all utilities replaced and upsized, as that is really the utility arterial of the community. So all upsized, and so it'll be, it's probably going to be a $30 to $40 million project. We call it the monster. Is that a fair comment, Mike? But a very critical conveyance of utilities across the community. Which actually brings me to water. Councilmember Stowe's comment was about Aiken. Yes, we're still doing the East Porterville Water Supply Project. The homes are connected. We're still working on the city facility side, which is, there are 2 wells. So of the 3 wells that are supposed to have been in production for that, only 1 is. We anticipate the next well to be online late this summer. I know that Mr. Knight is very anxiously waiting for that to come on. And then you took action this evening on Aiken, which is the 3rd one, which that will tell you how far that is away from it coming online, which is at least a year. So, I told you, get to the good news now, right? So, tertiary treatment is a big component of this, and I spoke previously about the $17 million partnership project at with the casino relocation, as well as there's a $5 to $10 million storm drain recharge basin. We have learned, and Mr. Knight has reported to me, that the Water Board is going to appropriate $2.5 million for tertiary treatment for the headworks, for the transition to third treatment or tertiary treatment at the corporation yard of our plant there. And if state budgets hold, or at least it would seem now, an additional $8 million will be allocated to the city for tertiary treatment. So for a total, we're hoping for a total of $10.5 million towards the transition to tertiary treatment. And that goes in line with the needs assessment that was done. We applied through the water boards for that. There was a $75,000 grant that was helped fund through that. And anything you'd like to say further about that, Mr. Knight? I know there's just a lot of moving parts in your world right now with that. So, yes, the answer to your question was yes. That was the well they pulled back on, and then it got reconfigured into the East Porterville water. In the end, was a net loss of 1. But it might have taken 5 or 6 years. But here we see on the backside, it would, at a minimum 2.5 million, and it looks like a good possibility of increasing another 8 million for a total of 10.5 million because it's a $60 million project by estimate to transition and treating all of our effluent, all 4.5 million gallons a day, which the plant out at the $17 million plant will treat 500,000 gallons a day. There's still 4 million gallons in the balance, which we'd be able to treat. And like I said, it's about a $60 million project to upgrade our facility to be able to meet that demand. So least there's 10 million towards that. And again, I shared with you, the council moved forward on certificates of participation. So there's probably 10 million in there. And as you just described in your, use of priority of ARP funds could be applied to that as well. So in addition to that, you didn't use all your bonding capacity for this because of the tight timeline. So there's additional capacity for bonding as well in that. So significant projects that we are planning for in water, in addition to that, is an upgrade of our SCADA system that operates all of our wells, reservoirs, and booster pumps. So technically, people aren't running around managing those. It's all managed electronically and needs to be updated to current technological standards, as well as security. You're probably reading now about communities whose systems are hacked. And so I'm wanting to ensure that you have security of your system as well. And then we're also in a water meter becoming a fixed network. So going beyond radio reads into actually a fixed network where individuals will be able to download an app and look at in real time what their water use is, as could any of the authorized city employees be able to do that. And looking at where there are leaks in the system, or right now it's kind of a manual process of looking how that is, and this would provide much more efficient management of water for that. Those two things together is between $4 and $5 million between the SCADA upgrade and the water meter fixed network. There is a water study that's being prepared and will be presented, and for that discussion at that time would be strategies on how, as grants are being received, because in large part your water rates go to projects. So as additional funds come in for projects, the capacity, and it all goes back to bonding capacity. Do you have the funds available to do the projects, which generally your water rate increases go towards? So if the more monies you receive outside of the water rate, the more easier it is to manage that. So there'll be some, and that's one of the things we will be, when that water rate is presented to council, talking about, which is to the extent that ARP funds or grant funds are received, less dependency on water rate increases. We are at the end, and as council's aware, implemented last October the last of the 5-year 2.4%, I think is what it was. So there isn't any other rate increases yet approved through the Prop, I just drew a blank, 218 process. So that is something that will be coming before the council. Actually, a number of rate studies, including refuse and sewer, are also slated to be presented to council this year. And speaking of sewer, there's, and you took action on one of those large ones today, which is the sewer annexation projects. There was 14.3 million of sewer bonds issued by the council, which serve 1,100 properties. That's how many properties we've accounted for to be able to connect through these sewer annexation projects. And so those are major efforts and under design, and hoping to begin construction soon. I spoke of refuse. I would say of all of the enterprise, that's the word I was looking for, enterprise funds, this is the one that concerns us most because it is operating in the red. Fortunately, the council does have, even after the transfer of $1 million from reserves, you still have $6 million in reserve. So that's able to paper over the deficit, so to speak. But this is going to be, in large part, what has caused this has been the change in the recycling market. You used to be paid for your recycling, and now you are paying to have your site recycled because there's no, to be disposed of because there's no market for it. So this has changed $500,000 from, $200,000 to $300,000 to the positive, to now paying $200,000 to $300,000 to deal with your recycles. So that's a $500,000 deficit. And what had been a pretty stable fund has become very unstable. And in addition to that, you have additional organic recycling requirements that are now coming without really any place to put it. So there's going to be some, I would say this is the most challenging and our most challenging budgetary financial issue we have right now, because it's, and one of the reasons why in the study, we are looking at, whether does it make financial sense to contract out for these services? So that'll be part of the analysis. From a capital project standpoint, there were a number of, if I can pull this up real quick, as contained in the budget. Oh, I printed it out. Capital projects, the downtown animal shelter facility is one. It is being prepared for authorization to advertise for bid by the city council. We have had funds set aside. Mr. Sanchez has alerted me that given cost increases that are currently going on, this is a real uncertain, I mean, it's as high as as I put in there, $7.5 million. Now, there's a number of different, it's not entirely general fund, there's other elements that are incorporated within that. But that is something that we're gonna need to look at and develop a strategy for funding depending upon how the bids come back once council's authorized its bid. Continue to make transit zero emission vehicle electrification and infrastructure projects. There's over $6 million in that project in this, and that includes the purchase of 3 more electric buses through CMAQ funds. We also look at Tule River Parkway Phase 3 going to construction. The Hawka Street parking lot across the street from the fire department at $500,000. Fire Station 1 and 2 have facility improvements that are contained in the budget. And then we're looking at City Hall ADA improvements, restrooms being retrofitted, and other counter improvements. We previously appropriated by council as a public safety evidence storage facility, stout building facility improvements, and Murray Park Pavilion renovations. So those are all contained within the budget. There's going to be significant time in other big projects that are out there, which is the Butterfield Stage Corridor, which is it's an $11 million project. And then subsequent to this there's been additional funds allocated for ETP projects, which it would appear that the segment from West North Grand to Strathmore is going to also be funded. So that'll probably be another, at least double the award. So we're looking at probably $14 million now for that, for the entire project. So it is looking as if it'd be grant funded from Strathmore to Porterville College, essentially, that entire segment through the ATP program. In addition to that, the city's ATP, we call it the Putnam Elderwood project. So it's curb, gutter, sidewalk, street lights on Putnam, as well as curb and gutter street lights on Elderwood, connecting the two the Burton Middle School, Burton Elementary area with the Summit Charter, Collegiate Academy and Intermediate School. Connecting those two areas together has also been fully funded by TK